How would you grade Brian Snitker's performance in 2023? And do there need to be some changes to the postseason format? We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Also, make sure you check out my written work over at bravestoday.com. And make sure you follow the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. Always enjoy hearing from you. And if you are new to this in the off season, a lot of these shows are going to be live. So if you want to join live, listen along, ask questions, comments as we go along, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, notification bell, so that you know whenever I do go live. So you can join if you want to, or if you're just listening on audio, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for everybody who makes Locked On Braves listen each and every day. Really do appreciate it. I talked to somebody at my full-time job today who is an everyday listener. Thank you so much for that, and to all the great everyday listeners out there for Locked On Braves. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Brian Snitker's status with the Braves. I've heard a lot of people commenting that, they want to blame the postseason run on him and the dysfunction there on him. So we'll talk about that and just how much longer I think Snitker will be around. And then I want to talk about the postseason format as well, changes that I would make. And it's obviously going to sound like sour grapes at this point, but there's always going to be tweaks and things changed about the postseason format. So I want to have that discussion now while it's kind of a big topic that everybody's talking about. And then later in the episode, we'll get into some of your comments and questions as well. Protect PR. No, I do not have a degree in psychology. Zach Mania everydayer as well. Thank you so much for that and for being here live with me. All right, let's jump into this podcast. Let's talk about Brian Snitker and the evaluation for him in 2023. Again, I've seen a lot of people saying that he needs to go. This team needs a new voice. And a lot of people, really blaming Snitker for this, these short runs in the postseason. And I can't disagree more. I don't think Snitker is to blame for any of this. Doc's card saying Snit is the manager. Managers are always to blame. That being said, stick with Snit. I tend to agree with that. I've heard a lot of people compare him to Bobby Cox in the postseason. A good players manager over the regular season. See Zach Mania saying Bobby Cox. But some of y'all saying he can't get it done in the postseason. I mean, he wasn't really supposed to win the first 3 years. Past 3 years, they did win a World Series. Certainly these last two have been disappointing. Chris Field says it's not just Snitker. There is plenty of blame to go around, in my opinion. But yes, Snitker did seem to manage as if he was on autopilot the whole series. Definitely a little slow on the trigger. I would agree with that. And look, I thought Rob Thompson did a great job for the Phillies in this series. I thought he clearly outmanaged the Braves. I also don't think there was much else Brian Snitker could have done in that series. I mean, what was he supposed to do differently? And I wrote about this on Braves Today as well, if you want to go check it out in written form. But what else was he supposed to do? A lot of people want to blame the game one lineup. I think that's somewhat silly. I think that's a false narrative out there as the Phillies go. Kyle Schwarber goes deep again. I don't think the game one lineup did anything. In fact, if you go back and watch how that game played out, that game one lineup worked to perfection almost. It set up Ozzie and Ozuna in spots to face lefties in key situations. Ozuna had a tough line out to shortstop, and Trey Turner made a great play on a ball hit up the middle by Ozzie, turned into a double play. So that lineup construction in game one, it worked exactly the way it was designed, and it set up righties in big spots against lefty pitchers. I think Ozzie had twice. He got to face lefties in that game. That's what you want, and that's what that lineup was designed to do. Unfortunately, just a little bad luck. That's not on, and that decision is not coming from Snitker anyway. That is a front office decision. So That's not on Snit, in my opinion. The only thing in my mind you can really question Snitker on in this division series is the game 3. And the way, leaving Bryce Elder in there too long, leaving him in there to face Bryce Harper, leaving him in for 2 batters after Bryce Harper. If you want to, have some qualms about Brian Snitker and his managerial decisions in the postseason, I think that's the one. I also don't think it mattered. You had to find some way to get through 9 innings, and I think that Phillies lineup, you were going to have to throw, AJ Smith-Shawvern. As good as he looked, the first time through, he still gave up 3 home runs in that game. You still were going to have to throw, a Kirby Yates, maybe a Michael Tonkin. Probably could have avoided Michael Tonkin in that situation, but you were going to have to find a way to get through 9 innings without using your best relievers. You weren't going to be able to get through 9 innings with just using Pierce Johnson, Jimenez, Minter, and Iglesias. You were going to have to find a way to bridge that gap for 5 innings. And it wasn't a great hand that he was being dealt in that game 3. We all knew that going in. Could he have done it, made better decisions there to keep more runs off the board? Certainly, but you're talking about the difference in perhaps losing 5-2 and 10-2. That game was, the Braves were set up to fail from the beginning once Charlie Morton went down and Kyle Wright wasn't able to come back. So again, yes, he could have managed that game differently. I ultimately don't think it mattered in the outcome of that one. They're not going to fire a guy who has led this team to over 100 wins the last 2 years and has won a World Series in the past 3 seasons. Not to mention, this is perhaps one of the best coaching groups in all of baseball around Snitker with, Seitzer, Eric Young, obviously Wash, all those guys. They're all great coaches. You ask anybody in baseball, this is one of the best coaching staffs in all of baseball. And that all revolves around Snitker. This lineup isn't designed to play small ball. They have to smash to win, just like the Phillies did. They're capable of doing it in different ways, and that's why we all thought this lineup was more postseason ready, because they also led the league in average. So they didn't just smash home runs this year. They also hit for average, but for whatever reason, just didn't show up in the postseason, and there's nothing Snitker can do about that. He can't hit for these guys, and this lineup isn't built for hitting runs, for bunts, sack bunts. That's just not built for that. And there's nothing Snitker can do about that. And there's really not a lot of bench players to mix and match. I mean, his only real solution was, for Pilar and Rosario to mix and match. And you saw he did that in game 4, took his shot, in that 7th, 8th inning. And then you saw what you had in the 9th inning, where you're having to go up there with Grissom, who hasn't hit all series, and you got him up there with the game on the line. So just wasn't put in a great position. And for those that think the Braves need a young voice, a new voice, look at the managers left in the postseason. You got Dusty Baker, who's 74, Bruce Bochy, who's 68, Rob Thompson, who's 60, and Torey Lovello, who's 58. I mean, all these guys are 58 or older, and Snitker's right there at 68. It's not young guys right now. Analytically minded managers said it's getting it done. It's old voices in that clubhouse. So I think Snitker still is the right guy for the job. He signed through 2025. The Braves did that at the beginning of the 2023 season. They extended his contract through 2025. I wrote then that after that 2025 season, he'll turn 70. Depending on how the next 2 seasons go, I could see him stepping away at that point. Whether the Braves, have first round exits the next 2 years, then maybe the 2 sides decide to mutually part ways, or if the Braves go on and win another World Series over the next 2 years, perhaps Snitker just decides to kind of run off ride off into the sunset. So again, Snitker's not the problem. It's the offense is the problem. This team was the best team in all of baseball with the regular season. He did a great job managing them through that. Perhaps there needs to be some changes in not just what Snitker does, but from the top down in how they handle the regular season to prepare for the postseason. And I think that's certainly something they have to talk about and think about this offseason. But again, Snitker's not the problem. Cherry says Snitker just needs to talk with GM Anthopoulos. It's been his only real mistake that I can think of. Yeah, a lot of these decisions are coming to the top. Spencer Thompson, if Snit does end up retiring, do they go with Walt or Wash? I think it's certainly a possibility. I know Wash is kind of up there in years as well, but I know he's looking for, another opportunity somewhere. All right, I think that's all the Snitker ones for now. Robert Chisano says, Jake, I think Snitker's biggest mistake was in game 3 when he allowed Elder to face Harper. He should have had Brad Hand ready. He managed game 3 like a regular season game. I'd agree with that. Again, if you want to lay one big criticism of the postseason on Snitker, it's definitely the way he handled that game 3. But again, in the end, I don't think that really changed the outcome of that game. All right, next, I want to turn our attention to the postseason format. What changes need to be made? Do changes need to be made? I want to hear your thoughts. I'll give you mine right after the break. I'm so excited to remind you about Bird Dogs. I'm wearing my Bird Dogs right now. Bird Dogs have their stretch khaki shorts. They become my new go-to everyday short that I wear around the house while working, out in the yard, playing with the kids, going for walks. I mean, you can wear them anywhere. And that's what's so great about them. They're designed to fit slimmer, but they also allow the comfortability to move around. It's so much better than regular shorts that can feel stiff. Again, I wear my Bird Dogs for any type of occasion: work, exercise, taking the kids to school, going to the grocery store, whatever it may be. I wore them at the hospital when my youngest son was born not too long ago. I wear them everywhere because they're so comfortable. And not only that, but they look good as well. My wife loves when I wear them. These are just perfect shorts for you. These stretch khaki shorts. I'm telling you, you're going to love them. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonmlb or enter promo code lockedonmlb at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonmlb for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. You can continue to catch all the postseason action with SiriusXM on the SXM app. All right, next topic I want to discuss today is the postseason format. This discussion has obviously gotten a lot of run over the last couple of weeks and really, compound with last year as well when this new format was introduced. And I just want to speak briefly about that, maybe for new listeners, those who haven't been following the game of baseball very long. The format was expanded from 10 teams to 12 teams going into the 2022 season, essentially added another round with a 3-game wildcard series, which gave the top 2 seeds a bye. Before, it was the top 2 wildcard teams played a win-or-go-home game, which I never liked. So I'm glad that they're doing a series now, but it has somewhat created a problem for top seeds. Only 3 of the top 8 seeds have made it through the division series, with the Astros doing it twice and the Yankees the only other team to do it. And they were facing one of the worst postseason offenses we've ever seen in the Guardians. So not a lot of success for these top seeds so far. The off days do seem to be affecting offenses. While it is a huge advantage to skip the wild card series where anything can happen, you also get to set up your rotation. You also have 5 off days now, where it was 4 before. So I've seen some people say that really that big of a difference, 4 days to 5 days. Well, top seeds who have lost the division series are averaging just 2.6 runs per game. You look at the Braves and Dodgers this season, 2 of the best offenses in baseball. They fell, they really struggled to score in the division series. The Dodgers only scored 6 total runs in 3 games. It's clearly affecting offenses with this long layoff and not being able, to get that timing back so quickly compared to teams coming out of the wild card series who, yes, they run the risk when they go into the wild card series that they could get bounced really early. But if they win, they got all that momentum. They already have that adrenaline pumping. They're facing, postseason competition already. It is somewhat of an advantage if you come out of that wild card series. So I do think it's hurting offenses. I just think you can't ignore the facts that we've seen so far. This past, it's not likely to change. Again, the off days aren't that much different, 4 days to 5 days. The problem is, again, it's not the same case for both teams. You got the team coming out of that wild card series. They're hot. Their adrenaline's pumping. They have all that momentum going from the wild card series into that first round. And again, they don't have all of those off days going into that division series. So again, I've said it before, you're not going to tank to get in the wild card series, because then you could have a couple of bad games like the Rays did and just be done like that. But I do think for the wild card teams to come out, especially if you win that first game. And I said this coming into this postseason, you have to win that game one. That game one is your advantage as a top seed. You have your starting pitchers rested. You're likely going to face their number 3. That is your advantage. You have to win that game one as a top seed. If you don't win that game one, all advantage goes to the opposing team at that point, because then they have their number 1 ready for game 2 going against your second best starter. And then they have their number 2 going against your number 3 starter in game 3 back at home. You have to win that game one. You really have to win both of those first 2 games. Otherwise, the advantage completely flips to the lesser seed. Now, that's the postseason format now. Again, it's not going to change. We need a bigger sample size. I just finished watching a podcast from Baseball Doesn't Exist on YouTube. Great. My first time watching a podcast over there. But if you want to check them out on their YouTube channel, they just did a video about as the postseason broken it. And I thought it was a really good breakdown if you want to go give that a watch or a listen. But nothing's going to change. And I think over time, teams will adjust to this and we'll see more top seeds win. But certainly right now, top seeds are having struggles adjusting to this. There are 2 changes that need to happen immediately. First one is the division series has to go to a 7-game series. It just has to. When you're talking about a wild card team coming out of that wild card series with all that momentum, and like I said, as the top seed, if you lose game 1, it feels like it's essentially over. And I feel like if you change this to a 7-game series, then as a top seed, if you lose that game 1, maybe you feel like there's less pressure and maybe you feel like you got more time. But in a short series, you lose that game 1 and then you're facing the other team's ace and number 2 in games 2 and 3 with that third game going back or going to the opposing team. That's a lot of pressure on that top seed to get it done right there. So I think going to a 7-game series is a no-brainer and needs to happen immediately. The other thing that needs to happen immediately is reseeding after the wild card round. Almost every other sport that I can think of does this, and it just makes a lot of sense. You look at this year, and I'm not, Braves need to beat the Phillies. I want to face the Phillies again next year in the postseason. I want to beat them and get over that hump, but Phillies were clearly one of the best teams. They were the team coming into the postseason that I said probably scares me the most. And the Braves have to face them coming out of a wild card series where, like I said, they already have all this momentum. They're already up to speed. Hitters' timing is down, already facing postseason competition. And the Braves have to face the team that's maybe favored to win the World Series right now. That is not fair, in my opinion, to a Braves team that worked hard all year, had the best record, and then you're likely facing the other best team in the postseason right away. There needs to be reseeding in the division series after that wild card round. May not have changed anything for the Braves. Maybe they still lose to the Diamondbacks. Again, that's not why I'm saying this. Almost every other sport does this. There needs to be reseeding after each round. So those are 2 things that I think need to happen immediately. There is no perfect format. We know that. There always will be tweaks that are made, and it's something fun to talk about. And there's always going to be, decisions to try to make the postseason fun. One thing, and I posted this on my social media account the other day as well. I had a conversation with Jake Mintz. Yes, that Jake Mintz from Cespedes Family Barbecue before the postseason. And again, what he said I thought was perfect. Postseason is for entertainment. It's not about what's fair. It's not about truth. It is about entertainment. And that is what this postseason is for. It's who rises to the occasion and short sample size in a sprint and in just 1 month in October. Phillies are obviously great at doing that. The Braves are clearly not, but that's what October is about. It's about creating entertainment and creating an environment for these drama-filled moments. And you look, Braves lost this series. I'll never forget the Austin Riley homer and that catch by Michael Harris to end game 2. That was an exciting moment that, again, we'll probably never forget. And that's what the postseason is for. And they're always going to be making tweaks to try to make it where there's more chaos. And in this format, you give the chance for more chaos with these lower seeds coming in and, again, getting to that wild card round, riding that momentum into the division series, championship series, and onto a World Series like we saw the Phillies do last year. This format really just feeds into that. And that's great for the sport. It's great for entertainment. So, again, there's always going to be changes. that we're going to be making, tweaks we're going to be making. Here is my one big issue with this postseason format. And I kind of wrote about this in a thread on social media, on X. This postseason format, and really every postseason format since wild card was introduced, diminishes 162. And as a baseball purist and as a baseball fan, I hate that. And my fear, and it's always been a fear with expanding the postseason, is that it would diminish 162. And never has 162 been so meaningless than it is right now. Case in point of the season we just witnessed. The Braves were clearly the best team in baseball over 162. You ask anybody out there, they will tell you the Braves were the best team over 162. But all that matters, from a lot of you out there that have told me this, and a lot of people out there in the world that watch baseball, is all that matters is what happens in October, as the Phillies scored two more runs to go up 5-0, about to take a 2-0 lead in the NLCS. But all that matters is what happens in October. And if that's the case, why are your fans, and I'm addressing this to Major League Baseball right now, what incentive do your fans have for paying attention for 162 if all that matters is what happens in October? If all 162 is for is to seed the top teams for the postseason, what real incentive is there for teams, for fans to really dig in for 162? You understand what I'm saying? Like, this has always been my issue with NBA and NHL. I've never been a huge hockey or NBA fan, but one thing I know, I can watch the first 20 games of an NBA NHL season. I'll say, okay, here are the top teams. There's no point in me watching again until the postseason, because half the league is going to make the postseason anyway. My fear is that's what's going to happen with Major League Baseball. And if that's the way we're going, that is a huge problem for a sport that relies on 162. If you're all of a sudden going to say 162 doesn't matter, and your fans don't have to show up for 162, they can just show up here and there and then wait for the postseason format, it's bad look, in my opinion. I think it could have some really bad results on fans. And we're coming off a year where, baseball broke attendance records. So maybe my concerns are meaningless here, but I really worry that's the direction we're going. If half the league is going to end up getting in, what's the real reason for 162? And I just, again, as a baseball purist, that really kind of scares me, because I love the journey of 162 and I think it needs to mean something. And it feels kind of corny to say this because we're coming off a season where the Braves were clearly the best team and we're bounced in the first round. But I feel like there needs to be some sort of acknowledgement. You want to give them a trophy, whatever you want to give them for the team that finishes, at the top of the National League, top of the American League over 162. There needs to be some sort of reward for that. If you're not going to reward them more in the postseason, because I think we can all, yes, Jermaine, the playoffs are definitely a crapshoot. And I think everybody needs to realize that. One thing I want people to realize, and Nick Castellanos said this after the NLDS, he says, one thing I'm realizing is that the regular season and the postseason are different. I don't know necessarily what his underlining meaning was to that quote, but I couldn't agree with him more. And I think once we realize that, I feel like there needs to be some reward at some level, some acknowledgement for 162. There has to be a reason to care for 162, or you're really going to lose and turn off a lot of fan bases who will just say, I'll wait till the postseason. If I feel like my team has a good chance of just making it there anyway, I'm just going to wait till the postseason until I really put all my effort and emotion into this. So that's one of my concerns with this postseason format. And it's always the concern when you're expanding the postseason, and Hollywood saying NBA season is 100% irrelevant, which is why guys load manage. MLB is headed that way. I was disappointed the Braves lost, but I was more sad for seeing 162 mean nothing with both LA and Atlanta. Spot on, Hollywood. Again, this sounds like sour grapes at this point because the Braves got eliminated, but it's the truth. The Braves just played a 162 game season, and for the most part, nobody's going to remember the fact that they won 104 games, were the most dominant offense we've ever seen, one of the best teams we've ever seen. because they went 4 games and out in the postseason. There's a problem with that. And again, it doesn't really sound great for me coming after a year where it was the Braves that blew it, but I want to say I would still have this same sentiment and comment if the Braves won the World Series. It's just, again, it's one of my biggest fears with this postseason format, and always has been, even when they added the wild card game. It's that you're going to diminish 162, and that's not what this sport has always been about. And it's going to turn into the NBA and the NHL, whose regular seasons, in my mind, are, as Hollywood said, irrelevant. All right, next, I want to get to some of your comments on this as well, and we'll do that here next. October baseball is back, and you can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to create your new account. Then you can get in on all the action from first pitch until the final out. Bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. Look, I hate it, but I'd bet on the Phillies to hit a home run right now. It just seems like they are hitting several in every game at the moment. So there's your easy pick to click right there. Bet on everything from strikeouts, again, to home runs, or who will win the game. And if you don't want to wait the whole game to get a W, predict what will happen in the next at bat with quick bets. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate this postseason with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/playsafe as well for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Again, you can continue following the action of the MLB postseason on SiriusXM with the SXM app. Getting back into the discussion, well, whatever you want to discuss, I'm going to jump into the comment section and look at some of the comments here right now. If you have a question, now would be the time to submit that. Just going back, Leland Hurt says, it's difficult for a director to mix and meld the choir into a unit. We have a team of soloists. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, again, this team has to come together mentally, and hopefully they find somebody this offseason that helps them as a unit come together. But you will hear them talk. They all say how much they love each other, love this team. I think that's real, but there's got to be a different mindset going into the postseason. David Agnesia says, just give the first 2 seeds all 5 home games in the LDS, less travel cost as well. I've heard some other people say that. I don't think that's fair to the other team to not give them any home games in the postseason. I don't think that's fair. I think you just take it to a 7-game series and you keep the typical 2-3-2. Protect PR says, I remember when the Dodgers were our arch rivals, not anymore. It's kind of what I alluded to the other day. You know, for so long, it was, when can the Braves get over this Dodgers hump in the postseason? And they accomplished that. They slayed that dragon, as I think Ben Ingram said on radio. Now it feels like the Phillies are that next obstacle that they're going to have to get over to get back over that hump and win another World Series. So like I said, I want to face them again. I hope we get them again next year in the postseason. Clearly doesn't matter what you do against them in the regular season, where the Braves were 8-5 against them, including winning 3 of 4 in that dreaded Philadelphia stadium to clinch the division. So want to see them again next year. Brian McGrath says, the only way the division series goes to 7 is if one of 2 things: shorten regular season to 154 or make the wild card 3 games in 2 days. Neither will happen, but in essence, I agree. Reseeding should be a given, though. Look, I just had this whole conversation about the sanctity of 162 and how that's out the window. And I made this suggestion. If this is where the sport is going, the regular season has to be shortened. It's not going to happen, as you said, because that's money coming out of teams' pockets, but it's honestly where it needs to go. But I've said all along, there needs to be one of those off days taken out in between, the regular season and when the division series start. There needs to be an off day in there taken out. Not only does that give more of an advantage, in my mind, to those top 2 seeds, but again, it gives you the opportunity to perhaps open it up for a 7-game series. And I get why they do the off day between games 1 and 2 to kind of throw off the scheduling, so both leagues aren't playing on the same day. But I feel like that needs to go too, or either start start a series, on a Friday and then start the other league on a Saturday and do it that way, like I think they've done in the past. Yeah, Barracuda owners will never agree to that because of gate revenue. I agree. Even though the season probably needs to be shortened at this point, it won't happen. Michael Roby says, what if the 1 and 2 seeds had a 3-game series during the wild card series for some form of stakes or advantage in the LDS for the winner? Yeah, when's the timing of that going to happen? I guess you said during the wild card series. What are the stakes? I guess the follow with that to be what are the stakes if you win that series? But I mean, that could be an interesting way to keep both of those teams, fresh, but it'd have to be a pretty big incentive to win that, I think. Barracuda, I have a weird kinship with Dodgers fans now. Can't believe I'm saying that. Yeah. Look, the Dodgers didn't have the pitching. You knew that going in. That's not my concern. It's the fact that offense was still really good and one of the best offenses, and they were only scored 6 runs. Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts were 1 for 21. I'm sorry. If you can't look at that and tell me that layoff affects offenses, I just don't know what to tell you. I get it. The Astros are getting it done. They're the only one. It's hard for me to look at the numbers so far and say the layoff hasn't hurt offenses. Richard Davis, 18 playoff format. Number 1 plays 8, 2, 7, and so on. All games start Wednesday and Thursday after the last day. That's where we're going. And again, that's just more expansion. And then we're getting to NBA, NHL levels. But I think that's ultimately where you're going to have to go if things don't improve in this postseason format. George Smith, could the Braves sign Ohtani? No. Robert says, Jake, do you think baseball will implement the COVID-style 16-team playoff if 2 expansion teams are added? I don't like the format, but at least there isn't a bye week. Again, kind of just what Richard was saying. I think that's where we're ultimately going to go, is to a 16-team format. I don't love it because, again, I think that just continues to diminish 162. But I think that's ultimately where this has to go to avoid that bye week. And again, you still feel pretty good. I mean, it's baseball, but a number 1 seed versus a number 8 seed, you still feel pretty confident about that and moving on. And at least you don't have to worry about that bye, and you still have a pretty easy first round opponent that you feel pretty confident that you can get by. All right. Sorry, running out of time here. Appreciate all the comments and questions. If I didn't get to yours, make sure that you put it in the comment section below on Twitter. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every game. Again, catch all the action of the postseason on SiriusXM with the SXM app. Subscribe to us on social media at LockedOn_Braves and me at Shortstop Ball. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves on YouTube and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.